the founder of the Parity Project. We advocate for the fair economic and narrative inclusion and equity of Black artists, executives, representatives in television and film. Basically, our philosophy is that, if we believe that the foundation of equality is adequate representation, and we believe that if Black Americans represent 13.4% of the US population, then at a minimum, 13.4% of Black people should be represented on screen and behind the camera in every aspect. We're fighting to ensure that, in all Black entertainment professionals, writers, directors, producers, all of us, including grips and stuntmen and women, reach a level of parity that's on par with our population in the US. And we're doing that right now through career mentorship, collaborations with other organizations, providing accountability metrics, and actually doing a lot of the checking ourselves, networking opportunities, and training and education. Today, we're going to be doing this exciting series called "Breaking into the Industry and Changing the Game," and we're going to have, there are 3 sessions of this program that we have already arced out, and today's the first one, and it's how to produce micro budget features. And our session will begin with our panel with our esteemed guests, who are going to be introduced in a moment, and then it's going to be followed by breakout sessions for the second half, the second hour. And in the breakout sessions, we're going to start with basically 15 minutes of with the first panelist, or me or Ramphis, or the host, Davida and Ramphis, and you'll introduce each other to your group. But then following that, the panelists, hosts, and myself will transition to other rooms for 10 minutes, and you'll be able to ask questions not only of the Parity Project, but of how to produce low budget features. And with that, I want to also thank everybody who has participated in coordinating this event. Nicole and Derek Garlington, you guys have been extraordinary and great. And Davida and Ramphis, thank you so much for all that you've contributed in helping us get the panelists. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ramphis and Davida, and I want you guys to tell us how you guys got started in the industry. How did you break in?
All right, awesome. Well, hello everyone. Pleasure to meet everyone on here. My name is Ramphis Myrtle. I'm a New York-based independent film producer. I produce films around people of color, the queer community, and behind women. Those are 3 really important things to me, and I feel that when the 3 of us come together, we come in numbers. I've been doing this since 2006, 2007. Initially, I started in the industry as an actor, and I wanted to take more control of my destiny and created my own production company, B City East Productions. And I started, funding my own projects little by little. I got involved with an independent television project where I really learned a lot of the grassroots, things that I need to know as a film producer. And this pilot, it never launched, but through this, I was able to meet a lot of potential investors. I found one of my first investors on this project, and it just kind of catapulted, off that project. I was able to do a little short film that got into the Cannes Film Festival, which opened up a lot of opportunities and doors. And over the years, a lot of the films that I've made have played at major festivals such as Cannes, Sundance. The list goes on, and they've been able to be on multiple platforms like Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, and so on. So I find it my responsibility as a human being to leave people touched, moved, and inspired. And I've been able to do that through my work, pretty much. And how this all came about was Ron and I were connected 3 months ago, and this was just an idea. And in July, the end of July, we talked about really moving forward, with people of color working in this industry. One of the things that has been discussed a lot is how do we create these opportunities? And it starts at the grass level, at the college level. And we felt that we should definitely tackle HBCUs. And from August on, this is how this thing built out. And I'm happy to be here, be a part of it with Davida and the rest of the team. And I'll pass it off to you, Davida.
Thank you, Ramphis. I'm Davida Chanel Smith. I'm a talent manager and producer at Etc. & Company. I got my big break in the industry when I was hired as an assistant at a management company that represented A-list talent, and that A-list talent was Black. And that showed me the potential of what was possible for working with talent of color. And since then, I try to produce very low budget projects across platforms and across different types of media. Usually I work with my clients to produce things, or often I just do short films for the fun and art of it. And I'm super excited to be here to learn more from our panelists and get to know some of you that are attending.
Awesome. All right. Um, so we'll introduce one of our panelists, Milan. He's a friend, a homie, a colleague, someone I'm proud to know. I met Milan in 2018. We both had films at Sundance. His film was like the talk of town. It was the biggest acquisition deal. It's called Assassination Nation. And Milan has gone on to produce many successful films that have played at Sundance and Tribeca. He had a film at Tribeca this year. He's been to Sundance multiple times. He had a movie called The Lifeguard that was at Sundance in 2013. He produced My Friend Dahmer, which was a huge, critically successful film. And I mean, I can go on and on about Milan. And the one thing I could say about Milan is that he's very kind, has a big heart. He's always paid it forward, very mindful of people and people's thoughts, and treats people how they want to be treated. So many times in this business, you know, I've met people that are very ego driven, or they don't look at the big picture, or they're not kind. And, you know, Milan is the perfect model of how you should be working in this business and how you should treat people and on a human level. So that is Milan. And Milan, if you can just say a couple of words about how, you know, you broke into this business, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, how I broke into this business. Just like everything else, there's no 1, 2, 3 ABC. I was a accounting major in college. I was an auditor, so not exactly the fast track to film, but it was one of these things. I started working with Time Warner Cable internal audit in DC, and then transferred out to the LA office where Time Warner owns Warner Brothers and New Line. So the first film they sent me to was Batman Begins in London. And it was like, oh, this is how they do it. And, you know, for 5 years, whether it was Superman in Australia, V for Vendetta in Germany, 10,000 BC, South Africa, shows like uh, One Tree Hill and Entourage. That was my film school for 5 years. And then at 29 years old, I decided, all right, you know, back then I thought 30 was old, and now I'm 42. But I decided, all right, time to jump over to the other side. And January 31st, 2008 was my last day at Warner Brothers. And 4 months later, I was shooting my first film on Sunset and Gower. And I think, you know, yeah, like 12, I'm the old man now. And, you know, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And you know, doing things like this is always exciting to me. When I first started, nobody was reaching back or trying to help somebody that didn't. You know, I grew up small town Indiana, an Indian from Indiana. Once again, not the fast track to get into this industry. So whatever I can do to be a part, and I'm excited. You know, Ron, what you've put together. These kind of things are very important to, you know, the arc, the trajectory of where we hope our industry to be. And I hope everybody on this call 5 years from now, 10 years from now is signing up to be a panelist as well, because it helps.
Thank you, Milan. Appreciate it. Davida, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, I'd like to introduce to you Mark Spark Welch. I do not have a personal relationship with Mark, but I am super intrigued and excited by his career because, like me, he has gotten a start wearing multiple hats. He has an impressive resume in the music industry. He's an award-winning producer. He's an executive producer on film and TV projects. He also does a lot of documentaries. So Mark, if you would please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got your big break.
Okay. Oh, awesome. First, I want to say thank you to you guys, for Ramphis, Ron, and yourself for having me on this panel. Wow, this thing goes back 94. This is when I was actually doing accounting as well for Mount Sinai Hospital. So accounting and the music business was my transition there. That was my first transition. So I had 100% interest in the music business. All my friends were in the business, but I was working. And the opportunity came, a very good friend of mine he co-managed Notorious B.I.G., managed Foxy Brown, we managed Shine and a bunch of other artists. And the opportunity came for me to work with him. And I took the leap, started at ground zero as an assistant and worked my way up from there. I believe in '98, we got to deal with Universal Records. My partner got his own label, and I became director of A&R. And the first project out the gate was Mary J. Blige. And, you know, it was the first album. And then the second album is where we got our recognition, which was the No More Drama album. Fast forward there, we got an extension on our contract, moved again. And then here come Napster in 2007-8. Wiped us out. Napster, we couldn't stop the bleeding. So our label at that time, MCA Records, which was one of the biggest labels, fizzled out. You know, they didn't know how to, they weren't making any more money because Napster was just taking all the free money. So I wanted to stay in the industry because my brain was always being creative. So I said, okay, what can I do to stay in this industry, but stay creative as well? And one thing that opened up for me was videos. So a friend of mine, we bought our own camera equipment. We got our own editor, and we started creating videos for the artists that we had relationships with already. And that started me into the video game. And then from there, we started creating content. Friend of mine, same friend that I started the video company with, we started a show called I Manage a Celebrity. He created the concept, told me about it, and I was 100% on board. And we had to deal with MTV. But just like when the guard changes, when president, vice presidents, everyone has a shift in their company, so did those heads got shifted and new people come in. They look at everything they have and they either wipe it out clean and then get a whole new batch in. And so our show got swiped up with that. And then we just kept pushing forward and kept doing partnerships with different people and got shows on the air. And it also got a lot of shows developed for other people, bridging the gap and helping other people get to the promised land of TV and film. So here I am now, you know, I have a partner at a company called Greenleaf, which is a 3-time Emmy Award winning company, multiple Telly Awards, and it's just a great company to be at. So we partnered about 2 years ago, and I had tremendous success with them. So here I am, you know, helping out other people get to the promised land of TV and film.
Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to more of your stories. So Ramphis,
Okay.
our last panelist.
My man, Boogie Pickney, Michael Boogie Pickney. Man, I met Boogie when I was still acting. This was like 06. You were putting together your first movie, your first film that you were directing. As a writer-director. You're Nobody Till Somebody Kills You. We met at this like place called, I think it was M5 Lounge in Tribeca, and a bunch of like the, you know, cast. Some of the cast I think was there. Some of your team was there. I mean, Boogie comes from the old like Spike Lee Club, you know, like you came up on the Spike, you know, you worked on all the great films, you know, Inside. I think you had just finished Inside Man when we initially met. This was like, what, 06, around that time. And Boogie's worked on Miracle at St. Anna, She Hate Me, 25th Hour, Bamboozled, Blade, Clockers. I mean, it goes on. And you know, Boogie's jumped around film, TV, web, There's not a hat I don't think you haven't worn. First AD, second AD, writer, director, you know, producer. I mean, dude, you know, low budget, huge budget. I mean, I'm just honored to know you, dude. And now you're consulting for one of the largest production companies in LA, New York, London, Jax Media. And you have a movement going on as well, you know, with Blackville. So the floor is yours. Tell us about everything that you're doing. How did you become this sensation? You know, please fill us in, brother.
Like you said, I started as an intern, working on a Spike film. That's, you know, that was my trajectory, from an intern to production assistant to AD. You know, like you said, I worked with Spike for, you know, over 15 years. You know, from Precious to Inside Man to Law and Order. So I kind of cut my teeth as an AD before I transitioned into writing and directing. But I was always somewhat directing while I was ADing. You know, so it definitely was a perfect school to be ADing for so many people to learn about directing and be a better director as a DJ AD. You know, you just learn, there's so many different ways to do it. You know, so I started directing, I started writing, and I started producing only because I wanted to be in control of what I'm directing. You know, so because it's so important to be in control of it. You know, as opposed to, you know, because ultimately they're going to control what you have to do. You know, how much time you have, how much you're going to spend. You know, so that's why I started producing. You know, working with Jax came because I worked on Precious, and Tony was a producer, and I was the second AD on Precious, and then I worked with him on Top 5, and then I first AD second season of Broad City. You know, so we had a relationship, so we kind of segued that into kind of, you know, figuring out how to bring more Black and brown people behind the camera. You know, so that's always been a passion of mine, just from working with Spike. We always had mentees, and, you know, we always kind of guided young people in emerging artists coming, you know, through 40 Acres. So I still try to do that to this point. That's one of the reasons why I created Black Belt.
Awesome. Thank you, Boogie. Appreciate it. Davida, I hand it back to you.
All right, so let's get into the panel. Milan, I'll start with you. Some of your early credits, like Batman Begins, V for Vendetta, those are movies with huge budgets. How are you able to transition from working on such big budget films and then create a model where you can make $100,000 film, which clearly has been working because those movies are making a profit? Can you talk a little bit about that transition and what made the $100,000 mark more of a sweet spot for you?
Because I don't have access to 200 million. So part of it's out of like what's possible. Like when I first like left like Warner Brothers, I try to do my first film at 7 million, thinking that would be easy. If those budgets are 200 million, well, 7 million should be easy. And all of a sudden I found out my friends aren't that rich. And so the transition, you learn a lot. Like at the studios, they solve every problem with more money. That's the luxury they have. And in independent film, you learn really quickly everything is an opportunity cost. So you spend too much money on coffee, you got to bring something else down, and you solve it by being clever, finding other ways. How do you still achieve the vision without you don't have the money, but how can you not sacrifice the vision? And that was a learning. I learned that over the course of the films. On my first film, it was just kind of, I'm still proud of it, but it was like a watered down version of what we're used to watching. And you realize the studios are playing a different game. And if you don't have the marketing budget and the star power, well, you can't play in that game. So you start evolving into finding the niche. And I always say, nail your niche. And, we have so many great examples in recent years, whether it was, Moonlight or Parasite or, not films I have anything to do with, but it's like those films could have been very small, but they did it so exceptionally, it couldn't be denied. And I think that was the evolution of understanding that really studio films and what we're doing, it's almost like two different industries. And I don't care as much what's going on at the Oscars and this, because you find out in your career, you start finding out, oh, they're playing a different game and they're spending $20 million on their marketing campaigns to win the Oscars. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm not part of that game. I could sulk and be upset, or say, all right, I'm going to be good at the small game. And there's a whole different industry that we're part of, and we still need these stories, because, you know, go back to 2013 Sundance, my first Sundance. That's the Sundance where this guy named Ryan Coogler did his first film, and Jordan Vogt-Roberts had his first film, and, you know, 7 years later, they're some of the biggest directors in the whole thing, in the whole game. So it's like, it just shows, you know, grow, build your team, you know, and work up the system together, instead of thinking the system's going to reach back and pull you to the top.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to piggyback off part of that question that you asked, Milan. Specifically, you can disclose as much as you're willing to disclose, but we had a conversation, I want to say about a month ago, maybe it was 2 months ago, and you were telling me about this new model you created where you're making these movies at $100,000, because you've done movies at the 7-figure budget level. But right now, over the past several months, you have a few films that you've put together for, let's say, 100,000, and you've gotten distribution, you've gotten major stars, and you created like a formula, like a secret sauce. So I don't know how much you're, you know, willing to divulge, but whatever you can share in terms of nuggets with that and how you created that, because that's a lot more accessible, as you were saying, to, you know, like if we don't have friends that could cut like 10-figure, you know, or 7-figure checks, but maybe 1,000 or 2,000 or 5, it all adds up. So if you don't mind talking about that a little bit more.
Yeah. You know, I've been talking about micro budget for the last 3 or 4 years. It's, if you started looking really closely at the marketplace, what's getting bought at Sundance and South by and Tribeca, and even having films there, and how much people were offering. Obviously, an outlier is our film Assassination Nation, sold for 10 million. So most people thought, oh, I'll keep doing big movies like that. But the stress of potentially losing someone, you know, multiple millions of dollars is not a fun thing. So I actually went backwards, and I was like, okay, I call it value-based filmmaking. So the sum of the parts, you never want people to say that's pretty good for having no money. You just want to no, I don't want the asterisk. You know, you got to focus on script, you got to focus on story. So in the time of COVID, I've just rebranded micro budget to COVID friendly. And what micro budget is one location, minimal amount of characters, not taking place over the course of a day and a night. And now all of a sudden, COVID friendly, well, you know, if you do that film at $1 million or 2 million, well, then you're union and you need all these bodies that you're required to hire. Well, you can't do that in what you're doing, you know, and keep people safe. And as a producer, first and foremost, it doesn't matter if you have $10 or if you have $100 million, you got to keep everyone safe. It's not worth it. That's not something that's negotiable. Oh, we don't have enough money to, you know, keep people safe. So, you know, creators got to create, right? So obviously the first couple months we thought this thing was going to go away when the summer came, and I had a couple films funded that were that 600,000 to $1 million. And I was like, and then all of a sudden, when you realize, oh, you're not shooting those kind of films, it's like, okay, do I give up or do I find a way to move forward? And, you know, the first film we shot in less than a week, because if your crew goes home, you know, has a weekend, well, you don't know what they did over the course of the weekend. I don't know if I can keep everyone safe the longer it is. And this new film is one of those Zoom style films where we send a rig with a tripod and an iPhone 11 that comes with an app, and the actor is their own hair, makeup, wardrobe. part of it's brilliant. I mean, you know, you're not going to win Oscars, but like I said, Oscars are a different game. So what was micro budget is rebranded into COVID friendly, but part of it's that's the game we get to play. There's no reason not to create. You know, if you're a filmmaker, be a filmmaker. The cost of making films has been brought down so much. And then secondly, you start learning, well, okay, now you've made the film, how do you distribute the film? And that's, I feel like we'll get to those things later in the conversation. So but yeah, so micro budget is now just COVID friendly. What do you have access to? Limited locations, limited cast, and just make stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, I actually for all three of you, but we'll start with Mark first. So the term producer, you know, a lot of people don't know what a producer is. I've met people not in the business, even people in the business, and what is a producer? You know, like what do they do? You know, sometimes a producer, their job is, you know, they just bring in the money, you know, and that's not necessarily the case, you know, all the time. Sometimes a producer is a creative producer where they're working with the director or the writer director from, you know, script to, you know, process of casting to the process of the creative on set and being involved with post-production and being involved with marketing, distribution, and also where should we premiere? How should we premiere? You know, all these things. And sometimes a producer does all those things and they bring in the money. And there's so many different types of producers and styles of producers, and there's titles, you know, you see the credit, you know, executive producer. What does that mean? Does that mean that this guy just put in money? Did he bring in money? You know, sometimes you'll see an actor with an EP credit, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they put money in it. You know, maybe they took a credit because they want to build their producer credit, you know, and we pay them a smaller fee. So the term producer can be very broad. But there's different job descriptions depending on the film. And I've experienced that, and I'm sure all three of you. And I'd like to start with you, Mark. You know, like what, you know, have you worked in the space as a producer? You know, what has been your specific role? If you just can just describe to us like your workflow and what drew you into this world. Yeah, if you could just drop us with some of that knowledge.
Okay. All right. So me as a producer, anyone that knows me, I'm borderline perfectionist. Like I want to have my hands on every aspect of the film or TV project from idea inception all the way to post-production. So when I'm shooting, bringing out the idea and I put it to the round table of my production team, once we get our concept locked in, our next thing is to shoot. So I'm at the table from concept, I'm at shooting, I'm at editing. I sit with the editor. I don't care if it's hours, if the editor is going to sleep. Like I'm one of those people, one of those producers that's hands-on on every aspect of the process. So, and then there's producers who plays a role of a money getter. I even play that role. I go to friends that have marketing companies or represents, for instance, Microsoft. I'll ask that friend, hey, listen, we have this area where we have a project that I think will be perfect for your company to partner with us, you know, bring some money in, and we'll give them honorable mention, this, that. We can even include them into the script. Like I'm that type of producer. So I'm not just one producer that just comes in and brings an idea or that's on set. I'm a producer that's from beginning to end, even when we're setting up for festivals. I'm that producer. I'm the guy who says, okay, I think I give my opinions on every aspect. We should go to the cans. We should go to this, every aspect of it. So that's an area of producing that I like to be. I'm involved in every process.
All right, thank you for sharing, Mark. Boogie, you're up next.
Well, I got into producing kind of by default, being an AD, you know, doing independent features as an AD, you tend to find out, like you said, a lot of the producers don't really know what a producer is, and somebody's not manning the wheel. So you find yourself as the first AD kind of producing. So then I transitioned into requiring to be an AD, be a producer when I was first ADing. Like I had to be a producer, especially if it was non-DGA and I was, trying to work on a smaller budget. So because I already did scheduling, I did budgeting, and I could read a script and immediately know how many days it's going to take to shoot. So just the logistics of producing is where I kind of went into it before I even got into the creative producing. Just the logistics, the nuts and bolts of how you make a go from script to shooting. It's easier said than done. There's a lot of moving parts. So just understanding that and being a director and knowing how to work with another director, how to answer questions that they're going to have because you're a director. So you guys have a similar language. So as a producer, that's one of the things that I definitely like to champion, just being, just fighting for the director. Because a lot of times producers, and director are somewhat at odds, but as a, so I'm a director's producer, so I like to think that way, because ultimately it only matters what's on the screen. Everything else is water under the bridge once it's said and done.
Okay, great. Thank you, Boogie. Milan, same kind of question. I feel like you kind of answered it with what you've already been sharing. But what I'll like to do on top of that is, there's been questions that have been coming up, and this is something that I want you all to kind of come back and answer with. Someone had mentioned, like 100K still seems like a lot of money. So on the micro budget level, like, let's say it's 25K or whatever, or, somewhere around that, and then also in terms of, crowdfunding, so if you could take that on, and we'll circle back to Boogie and Mark on that as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. Some people are like, yeah, that 100% right. 100,000 is still a lot of money, but going back to what I said earlier about I don't want an asterisk on our film to say, hey, that was good for not having any money. You want a certain level of professional product. So how do you get that? Well, you can get other people that are professionals that are going to work with you. You can't skimp. You need good sound. You need good picture. You need to look at the minimum Netflix like requirements on what your film needs to be, meaning shoot at least on 4K. But sometimes some people are like, Milan, I made this film for like 30,000, and I'll be like, I wish you would have spent 50 grand, because then you would have had a chance at getting distribution. Because what it took me a while to learn is it's like you a lot of it's reverse engineering. So I think the importance of casting directors, if you don't have the network to get a great cast and pay a little extra money to get that great cast. And of course, part of the game, and when I say great cast, I'm not talking about the one, the A-list people are talking about, but look through the film festival circuit, see who's in those films that are doing the kind of films that you're in. And, there's a Sundance, circuit of actors that most of the country doesn't know who they are, but they seem to mean something because you see them at the top festivals every time. So a lot of it's reverse engineering to the goal. Yes, if you're just doing your first one and you're just almost trying to do it like learn, and it's not, you have a few people that are just kind of supporting you, like, but it's not about the ROI, how much money they're going to make. Sure, do it at that smaller amount. But if you're trying to play with, the big boys, so to speak, it's like, well, then you got to play by that game. And the first question anyone's going to ask is, who's in it? And if you don't have that, well, then what is compelling? What is new about your story? And this is where a lot of creatives some of them hate having that first conversation with me, because they feel like I'm taking all the fun out of filmmaking. But like, I want the creatives to be creative, but it's like, let's give ourselves a shot to be seen. Because if you think about the number, like, what is it? Every Sundance, there's like 6,000 films submitted, 120 get in, 20 get those big deals you talk about. But even like 80 films that got into Sundance don't find that good a distribution. So what I'm doing, that former CPA side of me, is trying to mitigate as many risks as possible, and so getting scripts that go through labs and they win labs. Well, that's something we can say this piece of content is exceptional. It's not just it's not just another script. And I know that leaves some holes that some people won't be able to navigate, but for me, it's like our goal is to not just make it, but to get it seen. So we got to play by the rules that have the system that currently exists. Although, as we know, the system that currently exists must and will evolve,
And do you want to go into a little bit about crowdfunding?
Yeah, I briefly mentioned it in I tried to answer it. I personally haven't done crowdfunding. I'm not that big a fan of crowdfunding, but I don't fault people for doing it. I think there's a proper way to do it as you build your audience. I think people learn, like, don't give away things like t-shirts and stuff like that, because you got to make those t-shirts, you got to mail those. And what crowdfunding can turn into is a month of begging your friends for money. And back when Indiegogo and Kickstarter were really killing it with like indie film, you're getting like 10 of those a week. You can't give money, and people like were aggressive about it, and it's just like it's cost some friendships. And I think Seed and Spark is doing it well. Emily Best and her team, they're really building a community. So I heard the statistic is on crowdfunding is like 85-90% of the people are people you already know. So I'm a little bit old school. It's like, well, find that community that'll support it as an investment. But I personally haven't done it, and other people on the panel may have other goals. I've thought about using it after you're done with the film. Maybe we got into a film festival, we need it for finishing costs and travel to the film festival, because then you can start building your community and you're building your audience that you can go to distributors. So I've thought about that for some projects, but I personally haven't done crowdfunding. I know on one panel I upset a bunch of people because I said crowdfunding was dead, but like I don't 100% believe in that, but it's extremely difficult because it goes back to your network. And I see sometimes people say, their goal is 50,000 and then they get 2,000 and then they just go off with that money. And I'm like, well, what were you doing? The people that are successful on crowdfunding, if they're going for 50,000, they already know they have 25,000 committed. And on day one, they release like 5,000. On day 3, they say, we have a secret benefactor that'll match for the next 5,000. And it's a game and a structure, and there's a way to do it right. But just putting up a video and hoping that random people are going to find you and give you money, that's not how it works. So I think it's good to be honest and upfront about that. It's not just some cash drawer you can ring whenever you want.
To kind of hop in and direct to you, Michael, or Boogie, I should say. Most people, when they're raising funds for their first film as a producer, is out of necessity because they've created this project. It's passionate. They're passionate about it. It's a story they want to tell. But oftentimes with your background as an AD, as a director, you know that you can't get everything on a shoestring budget. How do you resonate between the creative vision and the budgetary confinements? And when you're doing things like a crowdfunding and you're working with the funds that are available to you at the time, how do you make sure that your voice as a filmmaker, because that's the whole objective, is to get yourself out there. So mm-hmm. how do you resonate the creative vision with the AD background, with the filmmaking necessities?
Yeah, and I've never done a crowdfunding before. But typically I start with the script, to me, the script has to be shootable, and it goes back to me being an AD. Sometimes, you know, directors have what they call uh, champagne taste and beer money, so, and as an AD, I'm realistic. So when I'm writing something that I'm going to direct, I'm still realistic, and I think there are innovative ways to get what you want to get without blowing up the budget, without having less time, without having to rush, without having to ask people to work for free. Cause I don't, you know what I'm saying? So it's like all of these things that, are going to work against you. So I'd rather have more time and use less actors and less locations and condense something and just really get creative before we start shooting. Because once it's kind of like, okay, so you got to hurry up, we don't got no time, that's not the time to rush. Just as being an AD, that's when we have those conversations in pre-production where it's kind of like, we know we're going to run into this problem, so let's figure it out now. Because when you're on set and there's 50 people looking at you, it's a lot harder to figure it out then. So I try to make the script shootable, and just use a skeleton crew, and and be lean and mean. And one of the great things about working with Spike is he's always ahead of schedule, under budget. He's really fast. He knows what he wants, and he's very meticulous. So so I got that from him. So I know what I want before I get there. And I've already shot it in my head as I'm shooting it. So just doing as much of the work as possible yourself. So the people around you don't have to get the brunt of it. I don't know if that answers the question.
That definitely answered the question.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. And then Mark, specifically with money on a documentary type project, documentaries take form, all types of forms. How do you anticipate those changes budget wise? And is that something you would crowdfund for, or maybe even try to get finishing funds? What happens when midway the story just evolves in a way that it changes your budget?
Well, I mean, I learned the hard way about documentaries, that documentaries are basically passion projects, whether it's our side or the people coming to us with the project. I learned that it's a passion project, and the funding for a passion project is not always available. So the good part about our side is, meaning my production side, is we have the capability to shoot everything from pre to post. So when we come to an area where it's like, okay, now we have to, see, I never had the problem of crowdfunding because we always had the capability to do everything. But when we are finished our product, that's when we come to, okay, now we have to go to either the circuits or we just go to our agent. I'm represented by Gersh Agency. So our agents take it from there. So we never had to really crowdfund or even ask for funds because we always had the capability to shoot. And that's also, it also opened up a lot of avenues for a lot of other people that come to us with great ideas. We don't have to ask for money. They come to us with an idea, with the script, and we first think if it's worthy to shoot or not, if it's a great idea that we can put time, money, and invest into the project. And if it's a go, then we do everything ourselves in-house. After we're done editing, which is the final piece, then we take it to our agents to the shop. So yeah, no, we haven't done any crowdfunding or Kickstarter or anything like that. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. You're gonna take it away, Davida?
Well, I just had one more follow-up from Milan.
Okay.
Specifically, a lot of people are asking in the comments about quarantine films, and we see that a lot of people have been able to do some horror films under the confines of COVID. As a person who has produced so many horror films, what about when the budget calls for things like special effects or blood and gore or things you have to have? How do you, on that 100K model, like make room for those type of expenses?
Well, you either have to have friends that are good with it or friends that are willing to learn via YouTube. It's all about resourcefulness, that I think how amazing was it to watch that team did that movie called Host. It's a 55-minute horror film on Shudder, but it was pre-financed by Shudder. But they just got a 3-picture deal from Blumhouse. And I think, if we're talking with a predominantly HBCU crowd, it's just like, we need more Black horror. Like I know I've been working on one for a couple years, but there's a great doc on Shudder called Horror Noir about the history of Black actors and creators in the horror. But then you look for films and they don't have it. Night of the Living Dead is amazing for, but that was Cesar Romero, so I think it's a great opportunity to be in genre. The cool thing about genre filmmaking is the reason I started you can't get your friends to watch your Sundance drama. There's so many, it's just like, they don't care, but the horror community, they'll watch anything. Like, if it's just like, they will go through what you put out there. So when it comes to cost, that's all about resourcefulness. Either you don't write it in, or you have someone that's willing to take a chance on you. And what's cool right now is there are a lot of people at home that kind of want to work. And if they feel like you can keep them safe and you have a cool idea, they're willing to do that. They're willing to share that. Like, I couldn't believe on our little Zoom style film, the actors we were getting, like huge TV actors from Parks and Rec and Schitt's Creek. And so I think that's up and down the line, not just actors, but crew. So becoming a student of film and finding who's out there doing it, and just reaching out, using Twitter as a business tool. I know social media can be an awful place, and it has become an awful place, but there's so much opportunity, and being a part of the community. Ramphis and I met through the film festival circuit, but that community is now online. And all right, I really dig what that person's saying. I'm going to engage with them. And, I'm looking at my first doc right now because docs are more COVID friendly. Like, it's only a few people, but I found her through Twitter. A couple of my friends both mentioned her at the same time. And, then we worked for a month on her materials. Like, she'd been trying to raise money for a while. I was like, your materials aren't right. We got it right. And then I went to an investor, and I can't really talk about it, but now we're to contracts. It's to the contract stage, but I think everybody on this call will be excited once it's announced. But I found her through Twitter. She'd been trying for like 4 or 6 years. Like, it's a great idea, but that community's there. So if it's not within your community, find that community and become a part of it before you start asking for stuff. A lot of times people are always talking about networking, and I always say, yes, networking's good. Networking's important, but the way to do, I would say most people do networking wrong in that they focus what they can get out of any situation. You got to show, like, the people that stick around are the ones, how can I help? Ramphis is great at this. How can I help? You got to show that you're willing to add more to the community than you're ever trying to take out. There's enough leeches in this industry. And it's like, be a giver. And yes, sometimes it's not like you have as much some people, like, you can't give that person money, this, that, but there's other stuff you can do and offer to help. And people seek out those people. It's like, it's all, yes, everybody hears about the word hustle, but who's hustling the right way? Who's, and is trying to be a part of the community and not just, thinking that they're just going to skip up the ladder. So always, default to what you know and who you know, But nowadays, there's no reason to not try to, seek it out. I think it's great. Things like this, and, thanking everybody for, clicking in. It's like, I'm nobody, but it's just like, if I can be help. I signed up for a few mentorship things this summer. I feel like I'm doing too many of those now, but it's like, I'm not hard to find on Twitter, and it's just like, I'll answer questions. You see me here. It's like, as people are asking, it's like, because I think it's cool that y'all are here and want to learn, because there's no book that just kind of gives you the answers. And it's like, so sorry.
Thank you.
I haven't talked to people in so long. Like
Exactly. That part.
I just get excited that people are here. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was supposed to be here for 3 days before I headed to South by, and I'm here at my mom's, and here I am. 6 months later. It's like, what just happened?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I feel like I'm out at some big convention. So thanks again to all the panelists and Ron for putting this together, because this is great. So Ramses, I'll turn it over to you.
So I was going to chime in about the crowdfunding thing. I was part of a campaign recently, a very successful campaign. We had 232 backers, and we exceeded our goal. And the reason why it was really successful was that, all hands were on deck. It was like a full-time job. We were putting in 40 plus hours a week each. We already had commitments going in. We used Kickstarter. That was the platform. So going in, obviously we didn't share this to the public, but we had someone that said, hey, I'm going to put in 10,000, and we had another person that was going to put in 15,000. And what that did was that it caused an effect, because now, people were looking like, wait a second, their goal is only 25,000. They've already hit it like in day one. And we were highlighted on Kickstarter's, like homepage. So now it was more viewable. And then it was little, donations, $20, $100, $500. And when we ended our campaign, we still had people coming to us saying, hey, how can we put money into this? We want to be involved. So part of it being really successful was that, we had a large database. We had a lot of emails, and, we sent out multiple emails. We would pound the phone, would follow up, make sure people got the email, because it could go into someone's spam, or it could be overlooked, or, we get hundreds of emails a day. Are we going to pay attention to that? So the follow-up call was very helpful. And then some of the things that did help was getting the press. We did have some media around it, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, just to shine light on it. And the production value of the Kickstarter video was very well put together. It was high quality, because if you're going to ask for 25 grand or 50 grand or more, through a Kickstarter campaign, it has to show a level of quality in terms of, the look, the feel, obviously the team. And that's how we were able to, put this together and be, really, successful, at it. So I'm not, necessarily always a fan of doing the crowdfunding, but it worked, for this project. And we were able to also build an audience around the material, so people could follow up and, hey, where's the movie now? What's going on? Or, they wanted to support. And that's what it was about, so there is a way to make it work. There is a science. It's not, you just put a video and then people will come. It's a lot of work, and it's a good team, and a quality video, I think, is part of, the formula for that. Now, with that said, this question is going to go to all three of you. We'll start, with Mark. But as a first time out, filmmaker or emerging filmmaker, there's certain places that you can cut, within the budget. Where are these places that you can cut and save money that are usually like overlooked? And what are the areas that you absolutely cannot cut or skim in your budget?
So when we first started filming, one thing that we did, we cannot afford these heavy duty, expensive cameras. So we started with, I think it was a Canon. It wasn't even a 5D, but it was, we just saw HD on the side of the camera, And we was like, you know what, this will have to work, and we'll fix it up in editing. But it did the job because we got paid for a great project that we produced. Where I see that we should not ever cut costs, I think in editing. To me, editing is like it's the storytelling, it's putting the puzzle together, it's the polishing of the colors, it's the polishing of the overall picture. This is where the front of your what is it? Oh my God, it just went blank on that. Well, editing, I would say I would never cut corners on editing. You know, that's one thing that I think that would make or break your film.
All right, Boogie, what about you?
I don't know if I would call it cutting, but the first place I always start, even as an AD, I'm like, okay, what's up with the script? You know, is it too long? You know, where can we trim? Because then that goes into how many days you're shooting. You know, to me, that's the biggest place that you can slash. If you can cut a day, now you cut rates for everybody for a day. You cut locations, you know, so I think those are areas you can cut that doesn't really affect the creative, you know, and just cutting down the dialogue and just really kind of getting down to the meat and potatoes of, you know, what you're talking about, you know, in the script. So I think cutting pages, cutting locations is a good way. And then, you know, eventually once it's on the screen, you got to add credits. It's going to be too long anyway. So it's better to cut before you shoot it than cut in post. Now you done cut a bunch of scenes that you paid for that you didn't really need. So let's decide if we really need the scene, you know. So that's where I would try to cut.
Okay, and Milan.
Their advice is so good. Like, you know, that fix it in post, it's fix it in prep, fix it in development. You know, most indie films can only handle an A story and maybe a B story. So if your C and D characters are having a conversation that aren't affecting character A, on the first couple films, you see that gets cut in the editing room every time. So now you cut it out of the script. So like, going back to locations, characters, script pages, those are the smart cuts. Editing and sound, those, you know, once again, you don't want the asterisk. This is great for not having much money. But here's something that, like, part of it is will be self-serving, but, you know, spending money on a casting director so you can get access to a lot of talent. And also, like, you can learn so much from castings because you're seeing how your words are playing out. Like, it's one thing on the page, it's another when actors perform it, and you can learn. And it's like, even if you didn't pick that actor, you like what they did, if you're the director, you can use that on set. But also, like, this is the self-serving part. You know, a few people have paid me as a producer at an early stage now. It used to be, it's like, hey, Milan, you raise money and then you get a percentage of that. And then I realized, well, this is an unfair endeavor, because if I get zero, I get zero, and I have value to add. And, you know, when I first started in this industry, people said, give yourself 7 to 10 years to feel like you're heading in the right direction. And I thought that was crazy. I was already 29. I'm going to be too old by the time that comes about. And 4 years in, I did my first film at Sundance, Lifeguard, which y'all mentioned earlier. And I was like, I knew it wouldn't take me that long, but I was wrong. I knew how to make a film. I didn't understand the business. And, you know, Assassination Nation was my 10th film, my 10th year, and it sold for 10 million. And if you look at my last 5 years, most of those films, I would say like 80% have been sold for an amount more than its budget just off the MG. And Ramphis, you know how hard that is. It's like, no, people aren't giving MGs today. So I'm not just saying me, but you need someone on your team that has been through the whole process, because you may know how to make the film, but then what happens? And so, like I said, it's a little self-serving, but I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about Ramphis. I'm talking about the other panelists. I'm talking about people that have seen the whole process. If you don't have someone on your team that has seen that, you're already at such a disadvantage in an industry that's already full of disadvantages. So I think their advice was great, and I hope that my advice helps too.
Well, to even give you an example of not cutting on editing, when I was producing the Next Top Model franchise, it was for the Caribbean, and we weren't on set at the time, but they sent probably about almost 15 terabytes of information of footage to us in editing. We sat in editing, but we now had to tell a story from this footage that was just shot, match up audio and video. So it took us about a good 2 weeks just to do that. And then after that, then we had to tell a story. But we made miracles happen in the editing. And that's where I was saying that when you're doing editing, I think that's one of the most important. I mean, of course, all the other parts are just important, but to me, just sitting with an editor, telling the story, there's no cutting in that. Like, that is so important, because that final piece, like I think Boogie had mentioned with credits, or what, I'm not sure if you mentioned him a lot, but credits, that comes in the beginning and it comes in the end. That takes up time in your film. And so there's a lot of things that go involved with editing that you cannot cut.
I would say about 95% of my recent films, especially the little indies, I'm like, do the credits at the end. Like with a little indie, no one wants to see the person in the car with their hand going like this. Like, just get into it. Like, a lot of people are only given your film, just like you hear about, they only give you the first 10 pages of the script. Like, they're giving you 10 minutes. So if you're a comedy, you better make them laugh in the first 10 minutes. If you're a horror, you better give them a scare. People have about 90-second attention spans nowadays because of our phones. So it's like you're 100% right on the credits and the timing, but so much of that was done historically. A lot of it was ego based, and it's like in indie film, there's no time for ego. It's just like, if you need to throw a cold open in there, it's just like something to just grab people, and to give them a sense that this person is going to take me on a journey that I want to go on.
So for everyone, I have attended so many of these seminars over the quarantine, and they've been very helpful. But I often have questions because I feel that the information that's being provided doesn't always pertain to me as a woman, as a person who's Black, as a filmmaker over 40 that's still emerging, as someone who didn't go to some fancy film school or even a low-grade film school. My question for you all to wrap up today with my questions is, what specific advice do you have for people like us who are Black, who are minority, who are women, who are over a certain age and who didn't go to film school? What early stage producing advice do you have?
Who's going first?
I'll let you go first, Mark, since we started.
Wow, okay. Advice. Wow. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't limit yourself. Don't ever think that I have an idea and I can't get it heard, seen. There are people like myself who are always looking for the next thing, not even the next big thing, because it's not always the big thing that shines through. The next thing, the next something, content that is thought-provoking, content that, and this is what I'm always looking for, content that is thought-provoking, content that is something that's happening right now, or a history, something that we can look back and learn from, projects that we can learn from. And this is what networks are looking for. They're actually telling us, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need. So they're actually, if it's not a network or a movie house, they're telling us exactly what to look for. So I'm looking for the same thing. If I don't have it, I partner with other people. I was just telling my Spark team, I'm gonna mention them, Isis, Marcus, Amir, and Vanessa. I was just telling them that, earlier that I want to be almost like the Uber for TV and film. If you take the concept of Uber, they make tons. It's a billion-dollar industry, but what they did is they partnered with people who want to work, who want to drive their own cars. They make the lion's share, but so does Uber. So that's what I do. I partner with a lot of people, and I'm not always. I don't take. I don't take the lion's share of their money. I get a percentage because I'm bringing lights, cameras, actions, my agent and my attorney to the table because I know they don't have that. So I partner up with a lot of people who have great ideas, and we make it happen. We get it done. So that's my advice: is don't ever think that your idea is not good enough, or don't think your idea is too small, or I don't have the funding. There are people always looking. It's things like this, and that's why I'm thankful to Ramphis. People like Ramphis out here that who is always connecting. I used to have a business card that said the missing link, because I was always the link between a person that don't have the opportunity and a person that can give you an opportunity. I was always in the middle, and I was collecting 10% in between until I learned, like, wait, there's a bigger thing than 10%. So I attached myself to the project long term. So yeah, that's it. Don't ever think that there's not people looking. There are always people looking. There's always people willing to help.
Thank you so much. Boogie, you want to go next?
I guess I would say my advice is to just surround yourself as an emerging producer with the right people. You know, the tendency sometimes with people of color is to think that we have to know it all and do it all ourselves. You know, you don't have to know the newest, fanciest camera that just came out. You know, you get a dope DP, you know. So I would just say, you know, in your tribe, you have probably a lot of the people that you need to support you, whether it's directors, writers, producers, you know, other support staff. And it's just about getting the right team of people, you know, together, you know, and you don't have to know everything. You just have to know people, and you have to, you know, just use each other, you know, and, you know, collaborate with each other, you know, work on other people's things. So when it's time for you, they can pour into you as well. So my thing is to really, that's the thing that's gotten me this far, you know, because being an assistant director, you work with so many people that you naturally just have a group of people that you work with. So that's the thing, that we just have to support each other and, you know, use everybody as a resource. You know, that's what I would say.
Great. And Milan.
I think, you know, the original question was especially for, like you said, with women and Black women. I think, look, the industry has sucked for a long time. And for the first time, I think we're seeing real change that's not going to be just lip service. And everyone's going to hold the power to that. And that's very exciting. You know, it is somewhat disappointing sometimes where it's like, if you're a pure introvert, this industry is going to be that much harder because it's not one that's going to fall in your lap. You got to step outside your comfort zone, and that's important. You know, an initiative that a couple of my friends started that has been amazing, and it's all free, is called Start with 8 Hollywood. You can find it on Twitter. And, you know, I had 8 Black female, it's women of color, but coincidentally, I had 8 Black female writers and directors as mentees this summer. And through it, like, somebody got like Jordan Peele's producing partner, Wynn Rosenfeld. It's like, it's amazing that people got, so find those initiatives, those labs. Cassian Elways has the Horizon Award. They've partnered with Franklin Leonard and Blacklist. You know, if anyone doesn't follow Franklin Leonard and Blacklist on Twitter, like, there's just so much information out there, and, you know, start a dialogue, you know. And it's like the amount of projects over the last 2 or 3 years that it started off finding each other online, and it's just like, oh, I like what this person has to say, and you figure out a way to find synergies. Not, the phrase I try to stay away from when people contact me and say, it's like, I'd like to pick your brain. It's like, well, that's a very one-way street. That's not, it's just like, what that, not that I'm asking for something in every situation, but it's just like, oh, you're picking my brain. Like, that's not a value dynamic. So you got to get out there. There's more initiatives than ever, but it shouldn't only rely on initiatives, but, apply to labs, whether it's competitions, script competitions, Austin Film Festival, American Black Film Festival, the Nichols Fellowship, getting your script reviewed. I think there's a certain cost with it, off blacklist, but if you get over an 8, producers will seek out your script, see how it does in the open market. Now, don't give up if those numbers aren't great. It's just one person's opinion. There's a million stories on a million projects that ended up Oscar winners that like got passed on by half of Hollywood. Nobody knows anything, and especially they don't know enough about, I'm always asking people, any creator, why this project and why you. Authenticity is so important, and that's where I feel like people of color we're going to be stepping through the door, because you even see a movie like Mulan, but then people started looking closely, and it's like, wait a second, the writer, all the producers, I think it had 4 writers, all white, all producers white, director white, costume designer had to research Chinese clothes, she was white. It's like, why not pick a Chinese costume designer? And it's just like, that's that lip service. They say they're doing it, but they haven't, caught up yet. But they're going to, because they're tired of getting called out, and we gotta keep calling them out, and they're very sensitive to Twitter, and I love it. Like, the power of a pick your battles and don't fight with everyone, but like, well, it's amazing to see how much change can actually happen. It's like, no, we're not just going to accept being in front of the camera, because that's exploitative. It's like, we need to see those opportunities behind the camera, and who wrote it, because you see that authenticity comes out in those words.
Thank you.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you for that share, Milan. We're going to go into our last question, and then we're going to go into the next section. I just want to plug in 2 things. One resource that you guys could definitely look into is this website called Dear Producer. It's ran by Rebecca Green. She had produced this film called It Follows. It was like 6 years ago she made it. It was done for $1 million, and it made $22 million in the box office, and it was like a cult hit. So she runs it. She brings on, producers that have had films all over the world, and whether it's a short, documentary, it's a feature film, and they talk about their process, how they got the film made, and what they're looking for next. So it's a good resource to learn, like what's out there, because there was a question asked, like, where do I find producers and how do I learn more? So that's a great resource. And then in terms of, our next, panel next month will be a series of 3 women, and they're going to be talking about their pipeline and how they get work, how they were able to build relationships and, be able to do what they're doing. So that's just a little plug, for, I think we only have like 20 slots or something like that left. So if you haven't registered for that, definitely do. And my last question to all of you is, do you have any projects we should be on the lookout, and how can we support those endeavors? Mark, if you want to start.
Okay. Wow, there's so many projects. Just like, Jesus, how many projects do I have at Ramphis? About 15 in development. But there is one particular project that that I'm working on currently. I can't even mention that one because that one's in contract already. Actually, you know what I can mention is the documentary we're working on. It's about a war hero from the Vietnam War. His name is Captain House. He worked, but he saved probably about 20 of his guys in his platoon. And he, when the helicopter came back to pick up the crew, he went back to save some more people. And while going back to save more, he got shot. They had to leave him there. This is 50 years ago. So he got shot, he got killed. They had to leave his body there, and the helicopter took off because there were bullets flying everywhere. So the guys that he saved are now grandfathers and great grandfathers, and they have never forgot this guy who saved their life, because they said if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't even be here with children and grandchildren. So fast forward 50 years later, there was a technology company that went back to Vietnam. They found his remains. I don't know, we got into the specifics that's in the documentary, but the specifics is they went back, pinpointed where his remains were, found his tag, found his, his bones and everything, and then actually brought him back to United States and gave him the proper ceremony in DC, in Virginia, Arlington, Virginia. And it's going to be, actually we won an award, we won a Telly Award already for that piece. So that's when we're still producing now, and how you can help is we need more funding to finish out, because it's we want to get it to the festivals. But yeah, that's one of the major projects we're working on now.
All right, Boogie, you're up next.
Can't hear you, brother.
Michael Boogie Pickney, you're up next. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. Well, Soul Kings, the pilot version is in Urban World this year. I don't know if they announced yet, but is an episodic competition. Most of the other projects are in pitch mode, finishing writing the script. So nothing yet that's in the phase of needing your help, other than just kind of staying in contact and just kind of, even Jack's Media, I'm doing, I'm bringing more Black and brown people behind the camera. So definitely connect with me regarding Jack's Media. I'm building a diverse content component to the diversity program also. So just stay in touch.
All right, Milan, you're last.
Okay, let's see. What can you get access to? A micro budget film that I sold directly to Shudder called Confessional, starring Marcus Scribner of Blackish. If it should still work, so I'll share it with this crowd. If you use the discount code CONFESS, CONFESS, you get 30 days free, so you could watch horror noir and Night of the Living Dead as well, some classic films. Our Confessional is a very small experiment. It was my first of the micro budget. Another one is called The Dark and the Wicked. It was my first official horror. It just was supposed to premiere at Tribeca. It just won an audience award at Fantasia in Montreal. Well, it was virtual, but the Montreal thing. It's 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I just shared after like 32 reviews. And then the last one is called The Killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, which is about a 68-year-old former Marine, a Black man who was killed in his apartment by the police in 2011, which is obviously tragic, but just this was 2 years before Trayvon, 2 years after Oscar Grant, and what happened at Fruitvale Station. And I'll share the press release we just had for that. I just brought on Morgan Freeman as an executive producer to help sell our film, and we're working very close with Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. and we've been in 7 film festivals, and in 6 we were eligible for the audience award, and we've won all 6 at Sidewalk in Alabama just last week, and other festivals like Austin Film Festival and Oxford. So good regional festivals, but it's a really powerful film. Frankie Faison he plays Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. He's so incredible in the movie, and I hope now with Revelations and Morgan Freeman and his team, it can actually find that audience, because hopefully the conversation about qualified immunity it's open and shut. The police should not have been sent to his apartment. Nobody called anything, and that's it.
All right, awesome. Ron, take it away.
Okay, great, guys. Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation and the knowledge that you dropped. We're going to transition to our breakout session. We are at about 40 people technically still on the Zoom. And so we're going to make those rooms about 7 or 8 people deep, maybe a little less than that. And we have about 30 minutes left on this Zoom, and certainly, like, if we want people to continue, they can do that, but we want to keep things kind of like to our 2-hour max if we can. So Derek Pete is going to start breaking people up. The hosts, Ramphis and Davida, plus our panelists. Thank you again, Michael, and Milan and Mark. They're going to be leading the different rooms, and you guys as participants will have an opportunity to have an intimate, conversation with them, and even have an opportunity in the first session to introduce yourselves to your the person who's leading your room. And then after about 10 minutes, they're going to transition like a round robin to another room. And we're going to do that for about 30 minutes. And it's kind of like, we'll just make the best of it with the time that we have remaining. Are there any questions? All right, cool. I'm going to let Derek Pete take it away.
Okay, guys, I'm going to start sending you to rooms. We're going to have about maybe 6-7 minutes, given the time we have left. So make the best of it.
Well, thank you guys all for joining the Parity Project and breaking it into the industry and changing the game. Really appreciate seeing all of these wonderful faces. Thank you especially to our 2 hosts, Davida and Ramphis. They have been on calls with me for the last couple months. And I want to thank you to the coordinators, Nicole Thompson and Derek Garlington, for helping put everything together and get out to HBCUs. We would like to have more HBCUs and other Black people involved in the Parity Project, in particular this producer series. So if you can share this amongst your folks, your people, teenagers are also welcome. People who, especially people who never thought that they could make it in TV or Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like, please share this series with them and our organization, because we want to make sure that we're lowering the barrier to entry for everyone across the globe. And it's not just for Americans, people from Haiti, people from Brazil, like everybody. So just remember that. And last but not least, I want to thank our panelists for coming on. You guys were extraordinary, Milan, Mark, and Boogie, and I definitely look forward to staying in touch with you guys. And just get involved with the Parity Project. This is everybody. Get involved with the Parity Project. Get involved with the producers who are on this. If you're a writer and you never, you're like, what do I do next? Make sure, like, if somebody said that you can reach out to them, you reach out to them and like really build your network. Stay tuned for more things that we have, but also think about ways in which you might be able to join us in our effort to charge forward and change the industry. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.
Everybody in California, please be safe.
Oh, thanks.
Really appreciate it. It's a blessing. Thank you. God bless you all. Be safe.
All right, you too.